Hello and welcome to Soul Family Chat, where we envision new possibilities for a new Earth. I'm Guy Harvey, your host. And if you'd like to be notified of future shows, please hit the subscribe button below and check the notification bell that's down there somewhere. It's my great pleasure to welcome today's guest, Amy. And Amy is a shamanic healer and a shamanic coach. And you can read all about her and her practices at www.higherheartpath.com. And welcome, Amy.
Thank you, Guy. Thanks so much. I'm happy to be here with you today and chatting about what it is that I do and what's going on in the world.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, my pleasure. And welcome. We also welcome our live guests, our live audience that people here on the Zoom as well. So welcome, Amy. Are you going to start with like a practice today for us to enjoy?
Sure. Yeah, I wanted to just do a quick drop in and invocation just to center the energy for us today, for who's with us today also, and anyone watching this video in the future. Um, Yeah, so we'll just get right into it. This is usually something that I do when I'm in circle with people and we're going to journey or do different things because, pulling in and centering that energy just helps us to express from a clear state, from our authentic expression. So, coming into this moment, we just really drop in and land in our seat where we are and be fully present in the body, calling in our own awareness to ourselves and of ourselves in this moment, in this seat, letting go of to dos, releasing emotions or sticky points from the day. And as we're fully present in this moment, we reach our root down deep into the earth through the soil and through the layers of the earth into through the caves, the crystal caves of the earth, deep into the heart. And the heart of the earth and all of the support that comes from there. And we take a deep breath and breathe that support up into our body. We feel it in every cell, lighting up our cells from within with the deep grounding support of the earth. And sending that grounded energy up, out through our crown, we reach up out into the cosmos to all that is and the immensity of creation in all its many forms. And we expand our awareness and we call that cosmic awareness back into our bodies, down our crown, and through into our physical body. And we meet those energies of the earth and the cosmos in our heart. And we feel that love, that big, big love emanating from our heart center. And we're ready to create with love. And with that balanced union in our hearts today, we call on the energy of the equinox, the balance of light and day. And as we stand on the precipice of the spring with rebirth, we see ourselves in our newness for the coming year. Thank you.
Wonderful. Welcome. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, to start with, Amy, I'd just like to ask you, just from your perspective, what is shamanic healing?
From my perspective, I think that shamanism is such a wide range of different ways of expression and spiritual expression. Culturally, otherwise, it's taken on so many forms through time. But for me, it is the union of ceremony and reverence and personal power in deep relationship with the earth. So with the earth that comes and just with all of nature, really, the earth, animals, cosmos, the helping spirits, and the elements, just to name a few. But also seeing spirit in all things. And there isn't anyone, in my opinion, who's exempt from that. Everyone has their spirit and their essence of source that shines through us. And so it's just the practice of the interconnection of all things and across all realms and space and time.
Beautiful. And can you tell me a little bit about your journey into shamanism, how you got started, and yeah, just how that all grew and came to be into your
Absolutely.
life?
Yeah. So years ago, I began my spirit. I started, as we call it now, waking up. I feel that when you look back, you can always see the connection in your whole life of how spirit was always working with you and in your life. But, there's a certain point where you become aware of it. And so at that point, I began really in a constructive manner working through um, old emotions and releasing different things. And then I just kept hearing shamanic drum circle, and I didn't know what that was. I just kept hearing it in my heart, and it was on my heart. So I just was like, okay, I don't know what this is, but I'm going to look it up. So I did, and I ended up finding a place about 4 hours from here, and I went to go check it out. She was offering shamanic apprenticeship, but I wasn't even sure what it was, so I didn't know how I was gonna. I just went up there. She was doing an event, and it was a women's weekend, and I ended up going to two because the land, when you cross the threshold of her land, it was so changing to the consciousness immediately. You could feel it in your body. The land was alive and well and in balance, and it was very altering in of itself. So I went to these retreats, and I started going there, and I took it very seriously. I really waited for a long time. It was a 3-year apprenticeship, and I wasn't sure if I was ready and what it would entail, but ultimately I ended up doing it. And I always laugh because the at the beginning of the apprenticeship, she was like, "What is your intention?" My teacher was like, "What is your intention for this work?" And I was like, "Oh, I want to get grounded," because I always felt like I kind of lived up here a little bit in my energy field. And then I got pregnant with my son, and I had such severe morning sickness that I was like on the couch for months. So I was like completely grounded. It was like, boom, earth there. And so it was just kind of this building process from there of learning to journey and making connections with my guides, my personal spirit guides, animal or otherwise, and building on that relationship in a slow, consistent, right relationship way, meaning I wasn't going to them demanding answers. I was bringing my soul expression as a humble offering to learn and to transform myself. And so in that journey there was so much healing for me first, and realizing these stickier parts of myself that were, as some say, like these subconscious belief systems that hold us back from our fullness and from our full expression. So it was a process of re-holing myself to come full circle. So I took a year off after the first year because my son was born and it was too much to be driving. Like I was driving 4 hours up, 4 hours back, and an 8-hour day once a month. So it was a lot, but it was good dedication for me. There was soul learning and experience in that for me as well, even being sick, morning sickness, and all that fun stuff. So it was a good experience for me. But yeah, so that was a 4-year process for me of building.
And when did you start that? That was about 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And what was your life like before you started? I mean, were you also involved in some spiritual practices, some spiritual training?
Well, what's interesting is I was raised in the Catholic Church. And from a young age, it kind of didn't fully resonate with me as my full expression of truth. And for some people, it is. And I totally respect that and hold space for that. But I knew I was reaching for more. But I also had a deep seated, almost past life oriented hesitancy towards ritual and ceremony. So I really kind of largely avoided all of that stuff. And so as I began waking up, it more took the shape of achieving like emotional freedom for me, working through old patterns, releasing old emotions, shifting density. I wasn't too into any practice in particular. I was just sort of searching. And so I'm grateful in that when shamanism found me, that it kind of felt like a natural progression in my path and helped me slowly acclimate to the concepts of ritual and ceremony again.
So you were called, that was your calling. And at that time, I mean, when you before you were called to this, you mentioned, for example, being ungrounded.
Mm-hmm.
How would you describe that, or other challenges that you experience in your life that sort of, prompted you? Yeah, I really need to do something. I need to I need to find a solution for this situation.
So for me, a lot of the ungroundedness was um, being very in the mental realm. So overthinking a lot, putting a lot of emphasis on the mental energy, and maybe even like running myself out because of overthinking. Just the unregulated nervous system, which to me translate as like an anxiety expression. I wouldn't call it an attack, but just a moment of, that feeling in the body when like hormones are released and it's like, oh, it's a very uncomfortable feeling. So that was kind of a common thing for me. Just sort of, and not really necessarily being able to gain a whole ton of traction in achieving goals and things that I wanted to do in this earthly realm. So grounding became part of that structure, able to achieve more and kind of get my center more balanced and moving into the heart space as well.
And when you started taking the training, can you? I imagine some of it's kind of maybe private or confidential, some of the things you went through. But can you describe some of the experiences or trainings or uh, breakthroughs that you had while you were doing the trainings?
Absolutely. So it's funny. I was just recalling this the other night to my husband. I said, it's funny, when I was in the training, I often, the logical part of my brain, especially, was very pronounced in the beginning. And not that it's absent at this point, but it's more in balance, I would say. Wanted more information, like structured, like data almost, of what does it mean when we talk about, working with the element of water, or, what does this or that mean? And so there was, it's interesting because it was more that my teacher was providing a framework, and it was up to my spiritual connection with my guides and building that strength to really find out how I would personally work with that for me in the work that I'm bringing forward in my soul expression as Amy in this lifetime. So that was funny for me to get over, just that. It sounds so small, but just that mental hump of needing like data versus accepting and opening and allowing to spirit to move through me and with me, and being this hollow bone that is a clear channel for that movement of energy, rather than needing all the particulars. So that was a huge shift for me in that work. And she also, in some of the stuff we talk about in the shamanic training, is like soul retrieval work. It was a huge portion of that, and learning how to navigate the other realms where, when there is soul loss, learning to call to the spirits to move there and to go into those spaces to bring those soul parts back for the person who's seeking healing. So a long time was spent doing soul retrieval work and just learning how to navigate those spaces and how to identify when something is lost and needs to be called back, and how to work with that energy. But a lot of that is again, drawing on strength of working with your guides, because you go there as a facilitator in the earth realm, but really we work on behalf of all the guides that support us in this journey on earth. So we did that, and then there was a lot of journey work in through that. So self-discovery, going into the lower world and the upper world, and asking questions and seeking information, symbols, and different things that aid you in your quest. So it was a slow build up to expansion. And so each journey you acquire more soul information. So it might not always be this like thing that you can express in words, but it adds to your vibration and it adds to your experience. And so over the years of journeying, you build up this knowing that is with you everywhere you go, that you have animal helpers who you can have a piece of their support and in your earth mission and what you're here to do. And then there's other aspects to shamanic work as well, working with deceased people who have passed on, who might be stuck or need guidance after death, extraction work, which is just misplaced energy in the energy field, ancestral healing, and again, moving into ceremony and letting that be self-directed, and learning how to listen to spirit and ask what it is that is trying to come through today for us, rather than, okay, I do this way, and it's this like methodical thing. So I think there's like a union there for the more modern mind to learn how to soothe some of those aspects that want to grip on to experience, and just sort of let it flow naturally.
Can we go just a little bit deeper into a couple of terms that that's for people that are watching that maybe is not as familiar? For example, well, we'll start with soul retrieval. That's when the soul is fragmented, is that right? As in, let's say, in different realms, and then you're pulling it back into yourself. Can you explain a little bit more how you see that?
Absolutely. So soul retrieval work is very powerful and transformational work. Like, there isn't always soul retrieval work to be done, because sometimes pulling, if you're in a really disempowered state, although it's easy to say, well, if we could call back some of your essence, you would be empowered. But if there's significant patterns and wounding, bringing back that power might not be in your best interest. So that's why we turn that power over to spirit to say, show me what needs to be seen. So you wouldn't immediately call on. So that's where releasing your will as the practitioner comes in, because even though someone it seems like they would benefit from soul retrieval, it might not be time yet. But yeah, so when we go through periods of distress and trauma, pieces of our soul essence may become fragmented and left or placed as a matter of protection in different realms, spiritual places, that it's a protection measure of the psyche. So it's not necessarily a bad thing that there's been soul fragmenting, because earth especially is such a jarring place
Hmm.
emotionally, that a lot of things can happen here. So sometimes moving into, you know, other realms for a period of time is required. But when you do the work and you've moved your place, even just being an adult, if there's been soul loss as a child, um, just being an adult and not being in that situation anymore that you were as a child, if you were bullied a lot, not being in school anymore, would be, an aspect of a different situation. So you may have soul retrieval that's just ready to come back right away, and that spirit part is just like, yes, I've been waiting, thank you. So there's different arrangements of that, but it can, once we call that back, and there's always an animal, a power animal that facilitates that, and you collect that essence and breathe it back into the person seeking healing. Oftentimes they report that they were seeing colors or having experiences of that soul part. And there's usually, when we talk about it after, there's like this moment of connection where there will be a phrase or an expression that comes through that was seen by me that I share with them. And they're like, yes, that's exactly what it was. So it's really exciting in that way, because it's spirit's way of solidifying the work that was done to let you know that, you really are receiving this. It's exciting.
You mentioned trauma, and a big breakthrough for me, sort of in my healing journey. I think it was when I was doing a work called Divine Mother Guidance and Healing, and was realizing that really for the first time that just to be human, to be on this earth at this time is traumatic, that it's very dense conditions
Mm-hmm.
on earth. And I think that a lot of people beat themselves up because I've had a feeling, and then there's all this, self-help that, you should be happy, and uh, and life is supposed to be great. However, I don't think there's any human being on this planet that hasn't been traumatized. You can't be born into this life at this time without experiencing trauma. And I think everybody really needs to give themselves a huge break, because this is really warrior work just to be born on this planet at this time.
And it's so true. We come in with a lot of different things. First of all, we are coming to work with ancestral lines and like just generations of trauma and difficult density, as we were, there's so many different belief systems of what this time is, but to call it the great turning, something has shifted. The energy has shifted of what we're working with as a planet, as people. So, we came to release a lot of that patterning and those things that exist within our body, because they're living through us as connection to our ancestors. And so not only were we working with that before we came in or as we came in, and then being here is so traumatizing and difficult. We have so much that we're up against, and as you said, density. And so this whole process of healing that we're on is accepting the density and seeing it for what it is. And, and I think that's why we see so much talk about shadow work now, because it is so important to understand that this isn't life isn't right now anyway about just being happy go lucky. We have to call these aspects into balance. So accepting that there's parts of us that are, shadowy or hidden from our psyche. And so calling that and shifting from that subconscious creation space where we're just living out these patterns unconsciously or subconsciously, and moving them into conscious existence. You have to accept that there's unhappiness and darkness and difficulty in order to rework it and make it work for you. So, as an example, being having a wounded inner child, you can take that wounding and say, how can I make that work for me? How did that create patterns in my life that I found strength from, or support in myself, or whatever the case may be, support from other people. There's different aspects of sensitivity to different kinds of trauma, of course, but we just move those patterns from the subconscious to the conscious to make them work for us. So you do have to accept the totality of the difficulty, but ultimately it serves an evolutionary purpose.
Do you think the whole sort of mood of love and light that's been prevalent in the sort of new age movement and teaching has been oppressive to people and in some sense created a disservice?
When I first started waking up and was seeking out information online, so this was about 12 years ago or so, I started finding some of this like so-called new age material. I appreciate it because it gave me language that I did not have previously, and it gave me an understanding of the immaterial realms in a way that could kind of rewrite that heaven hell dichotomy sort of thing that I was coming from structurally, being raised in that way, which I'm also grateful for because it gave me a large spiritual framework my entire life. But so the love and light has its benefits, absolutely, because we want to transmute some of these difficult things that we go through into the light. And so it has its role, but it can't be exclusive. It can't be only love and light. Like I see, you go to a store or something now and it's like every single thing I find, notebooks, shirts, everything, it's like good vibes only. And it's like, and is that the full picture? But I also understand the message behind it, which is like, shifting out of victim consciousness, which is so it's an important part of the journey of waking up. So I think it's a little bit of both. I think it has its role, but it can't be the only thing.
Well, I was thinking in terms of just honoring our feelings, and that it's okay to have a full range of emotions and feelings, and not to try and send them away. I mean, that was actually, I think, when I started on sort of very active on Twitter, or so-called spiritual Twitter a few years ago, that a lot of people were talking about that, about acknowledging emotions, and it's okay to be with the emotions and feel them, rather than let's say, for example, I'm feeling some very strong negative emotions, so okay, great, now I'm going to get my good vibes card deck out and light my candle and just positively drive myself out of that mood, rather than being with it and feeling it and transmuting it.
Well, and that's exactly it, because when we are just floating above an emotion, we're not really sinking into the depth of it and allowing that density to be transmuted, like you said, because, on that scale of, dense being on one end and light being on the other, if you want to take those emotions and move them up the scale to release the density, that's how we heal the energy body. And we release these heavier aspects out of our energy body to be transformed. If you're just blowing past it and, just looking the other way, essentially you haven't transformed it. It's still sitting there. And so it will continue to show up in your life as a repetitive pattern, as we say, like that you'll be triggered by that until you've changed it, and just release some of the density and your response to it. Bypassing is not the way to do that. You have to sink into it.
Can you define, just from your perspective, ancestral healing?
Yeah, from the way that it has showed up in my life, there were patterns that were present in, in the lines of my family. So you go and you look at your mother's mother, your mother's father, your father's mother, your father's father. You have these, these directions that you go, and you can work with each one for a time and ask for guidance, feel into that space, meditate on it, observe what you know, ask questions of your family if you're able to do that, if you're still in contact, or because I find that there is so much trauma around the family patterns. There's just so much, it's so dense, there's so much to transmute. And oftentimes, the only ones that we're really even in connect with are our immediate family, our parents, and hopefully their parents, our grandparents. Some people don't even know their grandparents at all. So we don't always have the ability to ask those questions. But there's, even in just that immediate circle, there's so much pain to work with. And I find that, I come from a large family. I don't think that every one of my siblings came here to do that kind of work, but a few of us did. And it's funny to see how it shows up in our life and the kind of things that we came to work with to transform for the line to change the patterns, to heal them, and to not hold them against our family, but to just say, what, I came here to do this work, so I'm going to change it, and just letting it be transformed through you as a representation for that line. So, and again, that's where that shift in victim consciousness comes in, because I can sit and be sad that it was this or it was that, but I can also say, how can I do this better for myself going forward and show up for those who come after me?
Yeah, family is it's like a terrifying word for many people.
I know.
And
I try to be really sensitive to that, because I know some people aren't connected to their family
yeah.
anymore. So that's why it's like, it's not always for everybody. It might not be your task in this lifetime to deal with that in the immediate way, but what you can always do is change the patterns in you going forward.
If you're in the audience here, if you have a question for Amy, you can just put it in the chat. I have a couple more questions for Amy, but you can start to think of your questions and put them in the chat, and then we'll pose those to Amy. I just wanted to go back to just to cover some of the main terms or themes.
Mm-hmm.
Guides, you talked about guides, and again, there's a wide range of probably interpretation of what a guide. So can you tell me how you see guides, and maybe share with us some of the guides that you work with?
Sure. So, most often for me in my work, I work with certain power animals, and they will, if I'm facilitating a healing for myself or for others, certain animals will present to guide the journey in the lower world, and sometimes we go up to the upper worlds and do what needs to be done, depending. And everyone's soul landscape is different, and the experiences we've had make up that landscape. But so these guides, so I just kind of stay open to what presents that day. So I have a core group of power animals that I work with generally, but sometimes someone else will come up, and um, just allowing that to come through and not be in that fixed mindset that's like, okay, I go to this place, I call on Panther, I do this. It's just like, you have to just stay neutral and open. So I do have mostly power animals, but then I have a few upper world guides who have come to me throughout time that they're individual to me. They don't. Sometimes I wonder if they're aspects of myself through time. It's hard to say. It's kind of it's a things work a little differently, in the spirit world. It's all very free flowing. I always encourage people to go to journey to find your power animals, because they are, in my opinion, the guides of this realm, because they are so connected to the earth and so connected to the essence, um, that they offer us a lot of different unique ways of expressing ourselves. Like, if there's power from, if you think of Bear, and the kind of power, to me, when Bear shows up, it's motherly affection, like that mother bear essence that comes through, of like holding space um, for a rebirth a lot of times, into this earthly realm. And yeah, so there's so many different essences out there to work with. It's really unlimited in that way.
I've seen the panther icon. I think that's on your Twitter. So you have a strong affinity with the panther.
I do. Panther really came forward when I started doing soul retrieval work in my apprenticeship, and that is generally the guide that I work with. I've always had big cat energy in my life. I don't know. They're just all kind of around me. So very supportive energy to my personal alignment.
Have you seen cats here in North America?
In out in the wild,
Yes.
like on the land, I haven't. I
Hmm.
haven't. Living where I live in Rhode Island, and we live by the beach. Like, it's very congested here.
Hmm.
No, they're not cats, but we have a lot of coyote
Hmm.
and come and hang out in our yard very frequently. So I have a lot of personal connection with the coyote at this point. And we had a parade of turkeys that came through today, so that was cool.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, we see them here sometimes. I mean, they weren't here in Iowa maybe 20 years ago, but they're here now, and
Hmm.
people report seeing them on the trails
Wow.
sometimes.
You have a lot more open spaces there,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
very congested here in southern New England. Not a lot of wild spaces.
Can you explain upper and lower realms?
Absolutely. So the lower realm is the natural earth. So you'll find the essence of the earth there, the essence of the power animals there. Deep, deep grounding healing is available in the lower world. It is rich and potent, and just the natural essence of this realm. So you probably won't, I don't want to fill in too many blanks, but I like to let someone's journey experience color itself in, but you probably won't see buildings or unnatural, not that they're unnatural, we built them, but, a lot of these structures and things like that, it's pretty much just the earth realm in its natural essence. Whereas when you journey to the upper world is more ethereal and can be a little bit of a learning curve to uh, attain information or retrieve symbols from, because it is just a little more, for me, it's more of a feeling state, where the lower world is very visual and material to me. Um, the upper world has this more kind of translucent essence to it. But up there, you can meet some of these, you might think of like angels or not incarnated beings, but there are
Mhm.
also, people have experiences with ascended masters there and things like that. So there's a lot of different experiences. So they more of the person or person-like entities you might find more frequently in the upper world. But I've also heard of people having experiences that are completely different from that. So it's very flexible.
Thanks for that explanation. I mean, I'm quite familiar, probably more familiar with working with that realm, with the Divine Mother work that I did, working with
Yeah.
Archangel Michael and different ascended masters and Jesus and Mother Mary and all those guys.
They're good guys. I like those guys. They're very helpful. Jesus comes through a lot for me when there's deep heart healing to be taken place. Also, the Spirit of Christ is so wonderful for, banishing some of these darker entities that want to take advantage of people's wounds and holes in their energetic field and things like that. So they can be a very strong collective energy that you can work with in that way. And, angels are always amazing.
uh, just back to the animal guides. Is that something that you facilitate? Like if somebody's working with you, that you can help them find who their animal guides are?
That does come through more frequently than not. A lot of times, there will be an animal that presents on behalf of the person seeking healing, that it wants to come through for them for that specific healing, especially if there was a soul retrieval work that was done. An animal will come through and, want to like go into their be with their essence for integration purposes. But it's not something. The way that I work is it's very like open ended, like let's just see what presents and what comes up, because everyone's different. Sometimes an animal comes through, sometimes an animal does not come through. So usually I will, in the coaching format or follow-up sessions, I will teach the person how to journey and to journey to the lower world to discover the power animal for themselves, because having someone tell you is great and fun, but experiencing it for yourself is what makes it embodied in your person. When you really can sink into that feeling their fur in your hand, or
Mm-hmm.
feeling their vibration in your heart, you really can't compare that experience of connecting yourself. So I love to teach people to journey to retrieve these symbols on their own, and the animals on their own, because it is so personally transformative.
And so with that process, or like any of your process, do you work with people online through the telephone, Zoom, etc., or is it all in person?
I do offer with everything that has gone on the last couple of years. I had shifted into doing remote healing over Zoom or over the phone, however anyone is comfortable. I also have worked with a few people over email if they don't have the time to call or don't want to or whatever. So, the energy comes through regardless, and what presents comes through regardless of how we connect. But I also do in person healing as well, which is always fun. I love getting together with people in person. I think it just adds this really wholesome dynamic to it where people can, connect. And so, either way, in person, on the computer, over the phone, Spirit loves when we work together, and that brings about results.
Wonderful. So that's higherheartpath.com for
Mm-hmm.
more information on Amy's practices there. So I'm just going to look over to the chat and read a question here. Amy, you mentioned an aversion towards ceremony and direct revelation when you first began your journey with shamanism. I felt this blockage when I first began my spiritual journey, and I've also witnessed this wounding in the collective. Do you have any advice for those who are starting to break through this barrier?
I think it always comes back to having a strong relationship with guides, because I think a lot of that barrier is the soul remembering the potency of ceremony and ritual. it isn't just some funny thing you do. It isn't just this like light, no consequence experience you're having. You can really call in some really big energy. So you want that support of a guide. Your guides who are already working with you, whether you're aware of them or not, they stand in support with you. And so it's really just about opening that relationship connection to be able to hear from them and connect with them in a deeper way and make offerings to them to say thank you. So when you create those connections and physicalize that relationship in your day-to-day life, you become more supported in being able to step forward and start engaging in ritual and ceremony again, because ceremony really is this merging of intention and action to create results. So you don't want to go in a less conscious state and create things that you may not be ready to create. So just working and creating that relationship with your guides will help you to discern more clearly what kind of ceremony and ritual you should or will engage in.
Back on animals again. I'm really into eagles at the moment. Eagles are a power animal. I did men's work for quite some time, and we did a kind of a exploration of self-revealing for our animal name. And I used to be growling tiger, and because you mentioned cats, and I'm thinking about maybe part of that was some of the anger that was rage that was in me as well, because it was the growling tiger. And but a few years ago, I kind of felt I transcended that, and I changed to soaring eagle. and I started to see a lot of eagles, and particularly since the thing that's called the pandemic, there's been more sort of wildlife here, even in town, like eagles. They just seem to fly even over town now. The eagles fly, and I see them quite a lot. So when a person sees an animal a lot like that, it feels an affinity. Does that mean that that animal is your guide?
In my opinion, yes. So, what I think is, or what I feel is the case is that we have power animals that work with us our whole life. Then there's animals that come to journey with us for a time. When there's aspects that we,
Oops.
of their, archetypal energy that they have, so like eagle, soaring, freedom, perspective, higher perspectives, these different aspects that we think of when we think of eagles, freedom. um, so if we're working with that energy for a time, that animal will come to us and present to us. And so sometimes it is being able to read the signs and connecting that when you're out in nature and realizing, okay, like for me, I have had this thought or this experience, and every time I have this thought or experience, a hawk flies overhead. And it's like, okay, I hear you, I see you, thank you, because it's this, for me, hawk shows up to remind me to, be an example and be a leader by example. So sometimes they might show up when I'm being a little like, grumbly or whatever, and hawk just comes to remind me to, see from that higher perspective and to be strong.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I love seeing the eagles. Now there's one trail I go on. There's a bridge, a walking bridge that's about 80 feet above the creek, and the eagles fly along the creek, and I think they don't realize that there's a bridge there and there's a human on the bridge. So I've had an eagle come, like, just a few feet over my head.
Wow, that's such a cool experience.
Yeah, I think, like I said, it's just, the eagle was just flying at that height over the creek. And then all of a sudden there's an 80-foot high, or 60-foot, 80-foot high walking bridge. And it was just, I mean, it felt like it was about 10 feet over my head. It might have been 20 feet. I don't know. The mind tricks with those perceptions, but it felt really, really close.
What a blessed experience. And it feels so good, and you can feel it in your body, when you
Yeah.
have that connection, you can feel that connection with them, and, just keeping in that balance. I feel like our heart very often is, moves into a state of gratitude, and we feel very centered in our experience. In that moment, it feels like, oh, I was in the right place at the right time. So having those connections are so fruitful for this, particularly difficult mission that we're on Earth, mentally difficult. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, another experience that I had was with eagles, and I mean, I've done this with other things too, but I know I learned a technique and from a couple of different teachers about, just saying I love you, whether it's to a person or even an animal. I know sometimes when I see an animal now, and maybe it's frightened because I'm a human and it's not so sure what my intentions are, and I just did some I love yous, I love you, I love yous. And I did this with there were eagles in the trees at one of the state park, and I did kind of I love yous to you, and then they just kind of they flew off and they came back, and they flew off, they came back, and it seemed to connect that,
Yeah.
just sending out that vibe
Yep.
of love and connection, and they responded to it.
And they do, because these animals are still so connected to that primal communication that they understand and feel when we're in that place. Humans have accepted, the modern humans accepted the idea of that dogs and people have this connection, and cats and people, but not that we want to go up trying to pet wildlife because they're not domesticated, but they understand our heart vibration and they feel that from us. So whether or not, they stay close or whatever, but you can feel that exchange. And like you said, they flew around, and it was like their communication to you that, we feel you and we see you. And, it can just do our interconnection with the animals and how they show up in this reality, and also in the, non-ordinary reality of the shamanic realms.
Can you just sort of go over the various practices that you do, or maybe break them down? I mean, you describe yourself as doing shamanic healing and shamanic coaching,
Mm-hmm.
and just before you start, if you're in the audience and if you have any questions, just put them in the chat, and we'll take those after this too. Thanks.
Well, in the flow with clients is generally that the first session is like a um, I don't know what to expect. Anything can come through. There might be soul retrieval work. There might be another thing that comes up often is chakra work, working with the different energies in the body, because that can usually be used as a guidepost of where there may be significant density still stuck in the body. And at the end of the day, the healer can show and assist or facilitate for spirit that movement of energy, but it's up to us as the one who's seeking to be healed to work with that energy in a consistent manner. So the chakras come up often as a roadmap to the energy body of where there may be sticky points or weak spots, and also our strengths, so that we can know, like, okay, my heart chakra is doing well. I'm living my authentic expression from my heart, and things are going well. I'm not guarded in my being on my day-to-day basis, but maybe my solar plexus is a little tired and low energy, so I need to cultivate that inner sun So that's a lot of the kind of work that I like to exchange with people, because I find it so practical and useful in a day-to-day way that, even if you're still working on gathering your personal vision, you're able to functionally relate to your body in that way, because embodiment is so critical to what we're doing right now. Like, transcendence feels amazing, and it's a great place to be mentally because you feel very free and expansive. um, but it has to be integrated with the physical body experience, because we are in the body and we are on earth right now. That's what we came here to do, is merge these energies and live that balance with all that we know, with all the mental work that we've done to expand beyond limitation of programming and things like that. So that's a lot of the nuts and bolts of what I feel my work is with people: achieving that emotional freedom, working through old patterns, looking at the chakras and the energy centers to see where there may be some opportunities for personal connection, and accessing soul retrieval and integrating those soul parts is a lot of what often comes through. And sometimes, again, the extraction, that misplaced energy, those come up, from time to time. But mostly, I love to teach people how to journey and how to self-diagnose and self-heal, because that's really how we reclaim our energetic sovereignty, is by taking control of our own healing. And I think largely we're recognizing that as a as these people who are coming to achieve healing. So it's a good place to be. It's quite a paradigm change, even from, like, 10-15 years ago, when, like, oh, I go see my healer. But you know there's deeper aspects that you, as the one seeking healing, have to engage in yourself.
Yeah, I really like that, what you said about self-healing and self-diagnosing, and I like that the observation you made that, in the past, that you went to see this healer, and yeah, that was very prevalent. I mean, people just go to their healer or to get their fix. I mean, well, maybe that mean to position it like that, but there's it's a strong word, but maybe almost like an addiction between the client and the healer, and having like support system, and to go keep going and keep going, but not ever really taking control, and being able to do the work themselves. And so I really like that you're focusing on self-healing and self-diagnosing.
you know uh and that's what makes it more of a practice, is rather than, like, approaching it from, like, this business perspective. Because for me, ideally, I'll only work with someone a handful of times, because I've taught them everything they need to know to
Yeah.
go forward on their journey. And that's the goal. And I think dissolving a lot of those programs of the so-called, in the modern way we understand it, dissolving the guru who, tells you how it is, and, what you need to do to achieve salvation. But we're shifting it into, how can I uncover this healing for myself? And, that's how we work together as a community. We share parts with each other. We share pieces that work for us with other people, so that we can do this together. Because the stronger we build that net of interconnectivity, or, as it was recently revealed to me, this network of nodes of ancient hearts. So we're activating this ancient heart network amongst ourselves, all of us together that are on this journey, and even the people who don't recognize it yet. So the beauty is that we are unfolding this new framework of reality building and experience building, that it's extremely messy and chaotic right
Mm.
now. But the deeper we get into this process, this is going to be what, you know, is called, this new earth, because we've created this new culture that is grounded in love and interconnectivity, rather than, like, dog eat dog, every man for himself, like everyone just trying to get theirs. I think we're shifting out of that, and it's the energy of the earth supports that for our evolution at this time.
Yeah, I've definitely had that experience with whether it be healers or therapists that, at a certain time it runs its course. And like you said, they've told you everything that you need to know. And of course, I'm not saying to anybody to, say, for example, leave therapy if they need that to, maintain their well-being, if there's danger and so forth. But whenever I've done therapy, I've always just fired them after a while, because I said, look, you told me everything that I need to know, and it's nice to pay to have a friend to talk to. but in terms of the actual work, like even therapy was useful at times because they explain concepts. I mean, even in the beginning, beginner concepts like codependency and things like that. It's nice they explain to me, oh, you're in this pattern and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But to keep going back and back and back, and it's just the same, at some point it becomes, it's like everything's being delivered. And I think it shows your integrity that you only work with them a handful of times. And I'm not doing energy healing at the moment, but I was doing energy healing. I also felt the same thing, that like after a few times, I'm kind of done. And I think it takes integrity as a practitioner, because like you say, there's there's like a conflict of interest in terms of, capitalistic business that
Right.
I mean, I have a background in marketing, and the best thing in marketing is to have a customer that's addicted to your product or service.
Right.
That they keep coming back for more and more and more, and those are your best customers. But I think it's a delicate area with healing, and it's really important to only do what is for the highest good for the client. And I really feel that from you when I hear you talking about it.
I feel very strongly about deconstructing those systems that even in, this, it's like I can't, when I happen to be somewhere that there's a television on and there's like advertisements playing, it's so jarring to my heart and to my soul, because those programs are so bad for us. They are so they're not there's no justice in that, because it's trying to create an addiction, a feeling of emptiness within us. How much of this seeking is coming from a place of being told that we're not whole, until we have this experience or have this material item or whatever. So deconstructing a lot of those things, I think, will be our work going forward, in coming forward with integrity, no matter what line of work you're in. Putting your authenticity forward and saying, I'm not going to manipulate people just for the sake of bettering myself, because it hurts
Mm-hmm.
all of us when we manipulate others.
I think the whole area is of coming to terms with various issues that we go through in life. For example, so I'm a little bit further along in my life, in terms of, say, in physical and age in this time dimension than you are, for example. And uh, I don't want to scare young people. One thing I realized is, well, some of the issues in my life, I mean, actually, they're probably never going to get resolved, because I've been working on for many years anyway. And so then I came to realization and said, oh, okay, well, maybe the resolving of it is the not resolving of it, is the letting go of it. And the self-help industry is totally driving that. Fix this, and then when you fix that, then you fix the next and the next thing. It's like it's whack the mole, and it's just this sort of frenetic circle, chasing one's chasing one's tail, like you said, because the industry is driving that we're not whole, and we always need to do something, and also maybe spend some money as well to plug that hole.
Yes, absolutely. There is that essence. I mean, watching the self-help industry come up has been good in some sense, because especially now after the last couple of years, I've noticed that people are starting to take notice of their emotional well-being in a way that I don't feel was necessarily prevalent before. Even if you look at how parents were parenting many years ago, it has evolved over time where we're much more gentle with our children now because we realize that we're creating these mental structures within them that they spend their whole life trying to overcome, just to feel supported in their life. So, part of it has been good, but then there again, it's that whole, the advertising aspect of it that relies on convincing people that, you're not good enough. And, that was one of the big things that I came forward with in the beginning of my own healing journey was, no matter what I'm doing, I'm good enough. I'm here. I'm a person. I'm a being that has incarnated in the body, and somewhere in some realm, I am a whole soul. So, you know, it's just remembering and removing the layers of the mental constructs to bring yourself to that space where you can accept and allow that into your experience in the body.
Yeah, that connects back to what we were talking about earlier when I was talking about the love and light, maybe the positive thinking, that if we feel the pressure, that if we've internalized that the normal state of life is is happiness, and therefore when we're not feeling happiness, then we feel something's wrong and we have to do something to fix it, rather than just being that's okay. So it's okay to feel the sadness. It's okay to feel the sadness today. I think it doesn't mean that we don't take action on things. For example, if I'm feeling some sadness, I'm feeling some depressed. I also know that I may, feel better or transmute that if I go for a walk in the woods. But it's the cycle of feeling like, oh, there's something wrong with me because I'm feeling sad or depressed or angry today.
And I feel like that is a great explanation of kind of what so many people in the healing community are starting to recognize. It is this, or have recognized, it is this middle way. It isn't happy all the time, and it's not sad all the time. There's this neutral center point of being that we can come back to in these states, because we do have especially doing spiritual work and removing programming and things like that, we do enter into these bliss states and these transcendent states of awareness where we might as well just not have sides of our skull, because we're everywhere, and those feel amazing, and it's a great place to be. But in the body, at a certain point, you do have to come back to your center point and recollect your energy and be okay with being the the center and the calm. And even if in this time of upheaval, when there is so much chaos and there is so much coming up from our loved ones that they're working on and transmuting, whether they know it or not, they're moving through these states of energy. We're doing it in of itself, and we're conscious of it and watching it. And even then, sometimes it spirals, out of our control as we learn emotional regulation. So understanding that those are all states of being that we engage with here, and coming into balance and of ourselves, sometimes it takes a long time. It takes, okay, I've had this chaotic thing happen around me or to me, or I was the driver of it, whatever the case may be. Taking that deep breath, coming back to your breath, finding your heart. There might be a lot of time between the event and you getting to that point, but learning how to get to that point is what changes the density of the situation, no matter how long it takes to get there.
Yes, I think that the sort of misunderstanding that, as we evolve, say, in consciousness, then all we'll have is positive emotions. And I'm just reminded of my teacher Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, I think at one point, and somebody may correct me on this, and it's just my memory and paraphrasing a little bit, but he was I think somebody asked him a question. And he was talking about Brahman consciousness, which is unity consciousness. And somebody asked about experienced sadness or something like that. And he said, in Brahman consciousness or in unity consciousness, then the sadness is experienced as infinite sadness. It was kind of interesting. So that like the infinity is still there, but the sadness was it was still there. And I think that many people on a spiritual path are sort of driven by some motivation of getting to some state where, oh, then I won't have to have bad days anymore. There's actually a video on YouTube by the New Age healer, Teal Swan. It's called "Even the Buddha Had Bad Days." And I posted that on Facebook, and oh gosh, I got a lot of flack just for posting it. I got a lot of flack, and people would say, no, this highly attained teacher, he never experienced sadness or this or that. So yeah, I mean, I thought it was an interesting. I like the title a lot. Even the Buddha had bad days.
And, I think that as we release density, we move up in awareness, not necessarily, as you said, into this state of we never have a bad time. Ultimately, we're in the body right now, and this is just the juiciness and the fruitfulness of being a human. We have these experiences where we can choose to engage in that consciously or not. So even if something negative or so-called negative or sad is presenting, we have the ability to work with it consciously, and that's what raising our awareness is. Not necessarily never experiencing that.
So one of our guests, Lisa, has a comment on what I shared earlier, and so she can put that in the chat, or after we've finished the recording for the interview, we can chat about it as well. I'd like to move into some kind of global concepts that are going on right now, and get your perspective on it. It seems to many of us that we've come to this bifurcation or kind of dimensional split for a lot of people in the world, where there are people that are very connected with nature and want to align themselves more and more with nature, and there are those who are drawn more and more to technology, and this seems to be driven from the powers that be. For example, in the thing that they call the pandemic, the solutions being put forward are medicalization, for example, and there hasn't been an emphasis on developing our own immunity. And I shouldn't say too much more. I'll get another. I've had one warning from YouTube. I'll get another warning from YouTube, but it's all right. We're building my channel on Rumble anyway, so. So those are two. That's just an example of two different approaches, and I'm not saying that everything with modern medicine is wrong, but there seems to be, in that instance, it's a complete imbalance that developing an immunity system and getting outside in sunlight and things like that, and all this follow the science, and this idea that the transhumanism, the idea that, well, if your heart goes wonky, then they can grow another heart and replace that, rather than, well, how about learning about natural foods and to live in accord with nature and exercise and everything that would, all the facets of developing a healthy heart, that there's always just this technological solution. So it seems to really kind of a split a split there. Do you have any comments on this?
Well, it's certainly palpable. However, in even before this whole event began unfolding, you could see the this split in consciousness that we're currently experiencing in our culture. People So this event kind of drew people either, as you said, deeper into that or away from that. And so it's been kind of surprising to see how certain people that I know have been shifting through this experience. And I think that, on a soul level, it just depends on what you came here to do and what your objectives were in this, in this lifetime. Some people may be experiencing things because they had karma to balance in this lifetime or lessons to learn. It's just so, our soul drive is so incredibly unique. As much as we are all one, we're part of this tapestry together. So, and I think that's why some of us feel so strongly about, you know, uh, drawing attention to it to try and, help people to see what is the larger picture of what's going on and what we're being driven towards. But I also feel that in the past, it was a little, it was way easier to steer the collective consciousness, where I'm not sure that the energy really supports that anymore. It does appear that we each individually are learning to take our power back, drive our own reality. So when it comes to these larger, these larger events on the world stage that we're watching, I often suggest when people are feeling overwhelmed by that to just digest what's on your plate. What is presenting for you? We're each working with that split in our own consciousness and in our own way. So, how can I show up for myself and for the people around me in a deeper, more whole way to be, this guide for wholeness? Um, so, in my perspective, like just going back to like you were saying, like when your heart goes wonky, just grow a new one, or take this pill or whatever. There's also the element of going back to that energetic root, and why, emotionally, where is that coming from? Because it all started from a spiritual problem, whether it was in this lifetime or lifetimes past, ancestral, whatever the case may be. So it's up to us to work with that in of ourselves first. And it might sound selfish, but if we work with that in of ourselves, some people are meant to be activists and be out there speaking the truth. And so they should always follow that impulse if that is truly what is rising from within them, because that's theirs, that they put on their plate.
Mm-hmm.
So as we move deeper into this, split in consciousness and awareness, I do see continual migration to more organic states of being. So I have faith that even though it's chaotic right now, I do see a lot of people, even if it's as simple as trying to eat better, or I go for my walk every day. I don't know why, it just makes me feel better. It's those small things that, spirit drives us in and is with us for, as we, get deeper into this process of the great turning, as we watch the energy change on the planet.
What do you say to people that are struggling with kind of addiction to technology? I think it's something that's ever present in all our lives now, and the younger, it's not just young people, but younger people don't even have the experience of, they don't have the experience of ever having lived without ever present connectivity. I don't know what group you fall into, millennials, or that the mainstream has come up with, but I know it's different for younger people. And like I say, it's not just younger people. I struggle with it as well. Like, I enjoy being connected and doing the Twitter and being with people, but I know it's super stimulating, and it's it's a very easy fix when I'm bored, just to be on a computer or on the phone.
What I would say, first and foremost, always get out into nature as much as you can, because nature is so assisting with us that overstimulation, because our nervous systems are like wired for sound at this point. We're like, we're just, but on the flip side, we're learning like a great deal of balancing these weird frequencies, and still we're like here and maintaining. So there's some self-mastery opportunities in
Yeah.
that, in learning how to not be a once you become conscious of it, then you go through this phase of like being afraid of your phone, and like you don't want to hold it, and like the frequency's there. So then taking your power back. I'm not putting my power into the frequencies coming out of the phone. I'm deciding for me my frequency is stronger than any technology that I use. So it's a tool. So to use it as a tool and not make it your whole life. um Back in 2010, I started to realize that every time I used Facebook, I would feel really down on myself after. And I was like, okay, so these pictures that people are posting of their best times are driving my inner state to judgment of myself, and
Yeah. Yeah.
feeling not good enough, and like I'm not doing enough, even though if I were walking around taking a picture every time I did something cool and pretty, it would be the same way. So I got off of Facebook. And it's funny because soon after there was like the advent of like Facebook being literally everything, where people would be like, oh, well, you have to go on Facebook to find it. I'm like, I can't.
Mhm.
So you're not on Facebook. And it was an interesting turn to watch come about from from already having lived my Facebook arc personally.
Well, I
Just
had
go ahead.
yeah, I'm just going to share an experience about Facebook. I realized, I said to a friend one day, I said, God, every time I go on, if you have enough friends on Facebook, like you take maybe a few hundred, which I did at one point, I said, God, almost every day, or 1,000 people, at least one of those 1,000 people every day is going to post a freaking picture of being on the beach in Thailand, being on the beach in Hawaii, and being being in Brazil. And
Yeah.
yeah, you're going to feel like, oh well, today I just got to slug through this work and do this and that. It doesn't measure up. I've got Facebook on a tight leash now. There's a couple of things I need to use it for work, but I just have 10 friends, my immediate family, and everybody's unfollowed. And
Yes.
but yeah, but what I like, what you said was you felt it, and that's like going with your body. How do you feel after you've been on Facebook and you felt that in your body? I mean, I found a few life hacks that are just sort of working for me. Like, for example, recently I switched from using a laptop. I mean, I still have my laptop, but
Mm-hmm.
it mainly stays stored in the bag now. And I got one of those new Mac Mini little desktops,
Mm-hmm.
and it's actually really reduced my computer time, because when I need to do something on the computer, I come into my office here and do it, and then I just shut it down, and then I leave. And I've looked at my screen time; it's gone way down, because with the laptop, what I liked about the laptop is, I feel like working in the living room today. I feel like working on the dining room table, and it would move around with me, or I'll put it into my bedroom. But it's like once you're on it, and you're sitting on the couch, and I'm even watching something maybe on Netflix, and still going back to the laptop. Whereas now it's like with the desktop, it's a dedicated kind of workplace for me.
Yes.
And yeah, and I still like overdo it and sit at the desk sometimes. But so there are little life hacks that you can do. And I mean, I got a timer for my Wi-Fi, and I notice when the Wi-Fi is off at night. My Wi-Fi is, not the neighbors and everybody else is beaming in here. But even when my Wi-Fi is off at night, I have a lot more dreams.
Wow. I also have a huge chunk of shungite next to my
Mm-hmm.
Wi-Fi router too. So I always, whenever I walk by, because it's in the stairwell, so when I'm leaving the house, I I always see the shungite sitting right there because I try to keep the router far away from, our central point in the house. But I'm just like, thank you for your work. I appreciate everything you're doing for me, shungite, absorbing all these, you know, these unhelpful frequencies that. So yeah, it's just always consciously working with it instead of letting it drive you. And I think that that's a lot of the point of the migration that we're seeing from
Hmm.
one aspect of experience where we're being driven down a road unconsciously and being driven by subconscious messaging and subliminal messaging, all that kind of stuff, to taking control of your energy field and saying, yeah, that doesn't work on me anymore. Sorry. And that
Yeah.
kind of goes for everything. And so that's why it feels, for a lot of us, it feels like the work is constant now, where we're just like consistently sorting through these aspects of ourselves that we don't want to work with anymore. And so it can be a little daunting. I think a lot of people are starting to get like spiritually fatigued with this whole work. But, when we make space for healing in of ourselves, more gifts come through. So no matter how difficult it gets, the more we work at it, the more the available energy comes to us to maintain and to continue to grow. So only goodness from here.
Wonderful. Before we close, would you like to share just maybe some advice, some wisdom for people to either just get started with shamanism or just getting more connected with nature? And the guests that are on live with us, I just ask you all just to stay on when we end the interview and the recording. You guys can just stay on for a few minutes. Yeah. So, do you have any parting wisdom?
Sure. Yeah. When we go into nature, bring your open heart to consciously engage with nature and make offerings of love so that you can enter into that respectful, balanced relationship with nature, and also understanding that you are nature. Um, Nature is not outside of you. You are part of nature. You are nature. We are animals, just in the same with all the animals. So we're all here together um, on this journey, and you know continued respect and reverence for all life and recognizing spirit in all things will take you where you need to go, and just maintaining that connection in a grounded and whole hearted way will never steer you wrong. And as always, I recommend people learn to journey so that you can meet your guides and build relationship with your guides, so that even when you're having a hard time in this difficult time that we live in, you have a team around you because you've met them, you've experienced them firsthand. When you go on a journey with the drum and you alter your mind state with that drum, when you meet them, and that frequency stays with you, and it's yours to take with you everywhere you go. Learn to journey if you're struggling, especially if meditation isn't working for you, because it can be hard to clear the mind when we have all this emotional baggage. It can come up and kind of ping around in the brain. So journeying gives you, a bridge of consciousness to focus in a directed way. So.
Beautiful. And I liked what you just said there, where like if meditation is not working for you, you can do this thing. And I think that's really important, is to find your own path. I did like a lot of meditation for many years, and then I started to work more on getting out into nature and more grounding and things like that. So knowing yourself, and just because everybody else is doing this one thing and maybe that's working for them, it might be something else for you.
Everybody's different.
Well, that was absolutely delightful, and I really feel that you embody what you're speaking about, and I encourage everybody to visit your website, higherheartpath.com, and feel free to reach out to Amy if you'd like to work with her, and Thanks just so much for being here and celebrating the spring equinox with us.
Thank you for having me. This was wonderful.
Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure.